we'll see how this works. We'll see how any of this goes. I'm not gonna lie, really fucking salty. Recorded this whole ass live stream on my. I recorded the whole live stream on this dumb app called, I think it was Spoon. I think that's what it's called. Recorded it all there, and then found for this is the second time I've tried to stream on there. Could not download either of the streams, which is great. That's exactly what I wanted, of course. So gonna re-record the whole thing so I can have this discussion, which I feel is just a discussion that I'd like to have, and a discussion I'd like to have for later and be able to share later, share it on YouTube later. I'm gonna save this discussion. I'm gonna get this discussion, redo it, so I can put it on like YouTube or something, and that's fine. That's just fucking fine. It's great. It's great. The reason why I was trying to use this app Spoon is because I pretty much just hate social media, I'm not a fan. It is not doing well for me, and it has been a very mentally exhausting thing for me, so we're just not going to do it anymore. And I really would like to be able to just drop everything and just talk to people, just drop everything and just have a discussion, say what's been on my mind. But at the moment, I was looking at some live podcast apps, and we tried Spoon. I was originally going to try Stereo, but Stereo would not let me stream unless I streamed with someone else, and I don't want to talk to a stranger. I don't want to have a full conversation with a stranger, And I also have things I really want to discuss, and a lot of it's just going to be me talking about things that are specific to me. Like today, I wanted to talk to you about why I self-publish. Anxiety. Broke everything. It's okay. Trying that again. Today I want to talk about the reasons why I self-publish my books, and that's very specific to me. And I want to be just randomly partnered up with someone to discuss that, you know. So that didn't work out. We're going to be talking about everything today, once again, second time, and we're probably going forth. If I continue doing this, it's going to be on Twitch, because this is less frustrating so far. Yeah. So, here we go. Why do I self-publish my books? Well, the first book that I did self-publish, and that I published in general, was my book, The Color Black. It is a poetry collection. I published that when I was in high school. It was kind of a school project. So what happened was, I had this class called Guided Study. And for that class, you essentially just go into the room, you pick a project, you work on the project, and then you present the project when you're done. And so I was like, hey, I want to self-publish this book. We're just going to take this time in this class to do that. Side note, I also used that class for a speech and debate speech that I did, and there was also a project in my English class that I could also use said speech for. So I presented the speech and debate speech in the guided study class and in English. And my guided study teacher found out, and he just came to me and was like, oh, so did you tell them that you were working on that in my class? And no, you petty motherfucker. You did nothing. You were just here to make sure the door's unlocked. I didn't ask you for advice. I didn't ask you for help. I didn't ask you for notes. This was 1000% just me. You get 0 credit. Go away. But side note, Color Black Poetry Collection, first thing I published, self-published. The second book that I published was I Hear Colors, and I don't know how much I actually did consider, trying to traditionally publish this book, but, there's just a lot of things that would have been such a major conflict if I tried to go a traditional publishing route. For one, it's super dark and depressing. It is really intense of a book. As well, I use fonts a lot in the book. I think there's like 10 or 12 different fonts I use in this book. And that makes it so complicated to format. Like, I barely had the sanity to get it ready for print. There's genuinely no way for me to make that book an ebook, at least not for Kindle. I'm looking into some options, but in terms of making it ebook available to like the Kindle store, that's not an option. It's not possible. It's with all the fonts and stuff, it's just not a thing they can do. And frankly, using different fonts in the stories has kind of just been my thing. I love how it looks for a book to have different fonts throughout. I love the visual aesthetic of that. So it's not something that I want to change, but that would make it so complicated. That makes things so complicated to print and to make ebooks and stuff. And so these are things that I think make this book and my other books really great. But again, I think a publisher for the most part would try and change a lot of that things to make it less complicated, would try and change those fonts to make it less complicated and easy to publish. But I also think they would try and, if someone even picked it up, they would try and make it more marketable, i.e. more happy. And I wrote this book because a lot of media will treat a character with depression, frankly, in like such a neat, clean way. And they also try and spin it to make it this super happy thing. So specifically, I read this book called Falling Into Place, and the main character attempts suicide, but when she gets out of the coma, it's like the stereotype of you just need to attempt suicide to get it out of your system. She's okay. After she wakes up from her coma, she's okay. When realistically, nothing has changed except because she tried to drive off of a cliff. She broke so many bones in her body. She can now no longer play soccer or swim, which are the only two things that were making her happy now. So if anything, she should be more depressed than she already was. And that's just so inauthentic and unrealistic and so upsetting to see that I ended up writing I Hear Colors so that way I felt like I could see something real. I could read something real. I had a character that was real that I could acknowledge and interact with. And side note, I didn't mention this earlier, but there was no part of me that was like, I'm not good enough for traditional publishing. There's no part that was like, oh, like there was no, it was just, I don't think, should I have tried to go the traditional publishing route, I don't think I would have gotten the respect that I would demand. And I wasn't going to waste my time. Another aspect is coming into and looking now at the Queen of Thieves series that I am currently writing. I had zero intentions and zero interest in looking into trying to publish these and trying to go the traditional route with these books. I had zero interest whatsoever in traditional publishing for these books. So we're actually going to, instead of talking about traditional publishing, because that is so not an option for me, that's so desperately not something I want for these books, or really, honestly, I think any of my books going forward. So we're actually going to look at this from the idea of, what if someone approached me and was like, hey, read your books, I want to make them a movie or a TV show. For one, I want to play Dallas. And, like, the number of men out there that get to write, direct, and, like, create a story and then a, like, movie and then star in it, fuck yeah, I'm going to play Dallas. That's it. There you go. There we go. And, frankly, I truly don't think there's anyone that could play Dallas Ryder as well as I could. No tea, no shade. But I want to play Dallas. I would also need to be a part of absolutely everything. Casting, music, I would want to help with directing. I want final say on the screenplay. I want final say on the final cut of the movie. And at the moment, if someone were to come at me today in the next year or so, it's mostly because the series is long, and then there's a same universe series, and then there's a prequel series, and I am the only person on this planet that knows what the story is. So yes, I think I have every right to want to be a part of all of these, to make sure you guys aren't fucking up the story I'm trying to tell, and make sure you guys aren't getting rid of things that are hints and foreshadowing for books later on in the series. Make sure you aren't trying to like change characters in a way that will ruin who they're going to become later on. And let's get into some specific aspects of this. Casting. I want to be a part of casting because their diversity, for one. Granted, a lot of the characters in that like main chunk of teens are white, and that's mostly because a lot of them play homage to people that I know, and I grew up in a really white area. I'm sorry about that. But outside of them, there are a lot of other like areas that I would like to be diverse and realistic in. For example, I have one character. She is a major character in the story. She's in a wheelchair, and when casting that, I would like it to be I would like to try and reach out to someone that is a handicap-capable actress, because I vividly remember, I don't know what the movie was called, but it was a movie with Tom Hanks, Kevin Hart, and this man in a wheelchair is like, oh my god, I saw the description of this story. I got so excited. I've been acting in a wheelchair for so long. I thought this was my big break. I thought this was going to be my chance to like really be a character that I could bring to life, have a character that I could really bring life to. And then they went with Tom Hanks, and it's not that Tom Hanks is a bad actor. It's not that Tom Hanks is going to do the role poorly. It's just that when you write characters that have these characteristics, these cultures, and you don't feel interested in actually portraying those people, those communities, those cultures in the actual adaptation, when you're actually presenting it into the big screen, when you're actually trying to show the story to as many people as possible, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth. That, like, yes, the story of a handicapped person is good, but like an actual handicapped person is not actually something people want to look at, you know? And so, while again, I want to keep true, and I want to be able to keep the diversity that I've had in these books, because ever since I've read that and read that person's feelings on it, it's led me to just essentially go through my book and just think, like, is there a reason why this character has these characteristics, these cultures, these traits? Is there a way, would it make sense to change it? And again, a lot of those main characters, while they play homage to people that I know, there's also plot-driven reasons why they need to be, like, a lot of them white. And then you go on to this one character that is in a wheelchair. She originally wasn't. It was just not something that I thought about, but after reading that, I was like, is there a reason why I don't have any, like, handy-capable characters? Is there something that I can do? Is there a character that could be? And she could be. And I was like, okay, but what is the story now? How does this impact the story? What does the story become with this person handy-capable? And I was actually ended up really developing another book. I've already written it, but it becomes a major plot point to the story now. And it is necessary now for that character to be in a wheelchair in order to make chunks of the story make sense. And that is something that I want to keep true to as much as possible when I am trying to do the casting for these movies, TV shows, and when I'm doing casting, I would also like to be working with people that will push me in that same way, so we can make sure any characters that pop up for 1 or 2 books, any characters that are extras, make sure we're pushing the diversity amongst them to make it realistic, really. Another reason why I could not just hand over the reins to these books is because they're like teens. It's a YA series. So in my head, I think of like most it's like Netflix mature. That's where I'm kind of going in my head with this, for if it's a TV or movie. And obviously, romance is going to be an issue that I would have to fight people for. Because there are some, like, even with my beta readers, some of the romances that they are pushing are just a lot. And romance is marketable, so I know this would be an issue I would have with production companies. Like, this, we should push this romance. No, that makes no sense for the characters. But there are some romances that would make more sense, but it would ruin the story that I'm trying to tell. And again, I'm the only one that knows the story. Just a little benefit of being the writer. And so it would ruin the story that I'm trying to tell, to have, like, to change these things, to change the, like, how people feel about each other, to change certain characteristics and certain, like, reactions to others' behavior, stuff like that. And that's just, I'm not a romance writer. I think I have 1 or 2 romances that I've been thinking about writing. We'll see. It'll be a long time because, like I said, I'm writing book 10 of this series. We've got more coming. It's going to be a long series. So it'll be a hot minute before we get to these romances that I'm interested in writing. But for the most part, romance is just, it's not a book about the romance. It is a book, and this brings me to my next book, it's a book about a severely depressed girl that gets dragged into the cruelty, the manipulation, the murders of the spy world. And it's heavy. There's some really heavy parts of the book. And marketability, I'm sure people would want to try and make it less heavy, but that, again, ruins the entire ruins the entire book. It ruins the need to put together a character that has real mental illness, as well as, and this is something that I struggled with a lot, because the fact of the matter is, there is a stereotype for what people expect from depressed people, and that is wearing all blacks, laying in bed, and taking poor care of yourself. But there are also a lot of people that end up committing suicide because you would never have guessed, because they're very high functioning. And I happen to be a person that was very high functioning in my depression. I was in so many extracurriculars. I could laugh and make jokes with people, but doesn't mean I felt like we were in any way bonded, in any way close. I didn't feel like I could trust these people, but we could make jokes. And like, it's really easy to hide depression, and frankly, a lot of the times you don't have to try that hard, because a lot of people just don't notice or don't say anything. And so I also really wanted to have a character that is high functioning, and that can do a lot with her life, but that doesn't change the fact that she is really hurting. Because at the end of the day, there's so many people that can do so much even though that they're really depressed, but that doesn't mean that they're hurting any less. And the last thing I want to talk about here is there are just aspects of the stories that are not normal per se for a book, like the fonts. I also have in the series tendency to use, not a tendency, it is an aspect of the story where you have these new cutaways, not to news, but you cut away to these daytime shows and they'll talk about news. And that's important to the story. And even beta readers, which beta readers are there to give you notes on the story, they're like, oh, this book didn't explain the purpose of them. You need to explain the purpose of them right away. But when looking at the readers and people who are reading it because they want to enjoy it, they seem just interested. They're curious about where these are going to go, where these stories are going to go, and they will go somewhere. They're going to be a very important part of the story, but that's something that I know would have been dismissed and probably I would have been told to cut. But it's the situation of, how am I supposed to push the envelope? How am I supposed to make change or inspire people if I only work within the things that they're comfortable in? And that was another reason. That is another thing. I feel like I would have been so boxed in with traditional publishing, and that's something I feel like I truly have the whole of my imagination and anything that I can think I can create in my writing with self-publishing. So, like, and again, probably one of my favorite book series right now is self-published book. There's nothing wrong with self-publishing. There's nothing lesser. You are not lesser than a traditionally published person. It's really just, it's harder. It's going to be a harder experience. Maybe, depending on the publisher, because for the most part, a lot of traditional publishers that are going to work with small writers, you have to do all the same marketing tactics that you would anyway. Someone else just gets a bigger cut of it. And so there's nothing wrong with self-publishing a book. But it's frustrating to have someone like look down on you when, like, my dog, I'm writing. How many books did I write last year? I want to say I wrote 3 or 4 books last year. I'm supposed to stop all of that momentum so someone else can decide so I can give a shit about how someone else cares about this book and what someone else thinks about this book. Because the fact of the matter is, I am disadvantaged in this. There's bias in the publishing industry for race and gender, and I have short ends of both of those sticks. So it's going to take a while before I find someone. Was I supposed to stop? Because I frankly that would have meant stopping at I Hear Colors, and that book would still be waiting to get published. I'm so far into this series, and then we have these other series in the same universe to work with, and I have so many other books that I've been planning and working on and thinking about and mapping out in my head until I get to a better point with this series, whether or not it's waiting for these to be done or waiting for a point in which I can't afford, like, someone to do the marketing, frankly, if I can get someone to do my YouTube editing, that would take off so much give me so much extra time to focus on books. But stuff like that, like, it's going to take a minute before, when I get to that point, I have other series that I want to start working on that are not in the same genre as this series. And that's another thing that would be harder to push and harder to give to a publisher. It would be harder to tell them, like, hey, there's a hard stopping point on this series. There is nothing else to write with this series. I've given you 40 books, my dog. We can stop there. If it's making money, they're gonna try and encourage me to just squeeze out more about this series, and that's not what I'm here for. I got a story to tell. I will tell it, but it stops when the story is done. And so I do not think I would have gotten the respect that I deserve in traditional publishing, but I also don't, like, I love the control that I have over my art form in self-publishing, and I'm very happy with where I'm at in this series and where I'm at with these books. So, yes, it's annoying, but is it going to stop me? Absolutely not. Thank you guys so much for listening. That's all from me. But until next time, valedictions, friends.